Welcome to Make EdTech 100. I'm Lindy Hawk, educator, K-12 EdTech advisor, and your host. This is a podcast where we keep it real about what actually works in classrooms. No hype, no overwhelm, just practical strategies, honest stories, and tools that make a real difference for teachers and students. So come along with me on a journey to make EdTech 100. Today's guest was already quoted on the podcast a few episodes ago. Adam Sparks is the source of use case, not existence, when it comes to technology use in classrooms. So to continue my series on screen time in schools, I knew I had to get Adam on for a great conversation. Adam is an English and social studies teacher who recently finished his master's degree in learning design and technology. And as part of his master's coursework, he built a digital writing tool called Short Answer. It's really amazing. We'll talk about that more in the episode. It's so powerful that he now works full-time developing and sharing Short Answer with schools and educators. Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and chat with you, Lindy.
Tell us, what else do listeners need to know about you?
I think you got it. I taught for 7 years. I went to grad school. I built what was supposed to be a master's project. We got grant funding and launched it. And here we are, building it 3 years later. So I feel lucky to do the work I do. I do it with my wife, Alexa, which is special and unique and fun. And I'm really passionate about education and technology in our current moment. And I feel like I'm in the right place. I'm really on fire by the work right now, which is fun.
I named the podcast Make EdTech 100 because that meaning is open to interpretation of whatever it means to you. So I like to ask every guest to tell us, what does Make EdTech 100 mean to you?
Oh man. Well, I think of 100. It's like keep it 100. Like it's like 100%. Like keep EdTech good. I don't know if that's I equated in my mind to good. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but yeah. So keep educational technology high quality.
Yeah,
which is fitting for our current moment.
It is very fitting for the current moment.
Right. So yeah, that's where my mind goes. I don't know.
The current conversation is focusing on quantity and not quality.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
So that is super, super fitting amongst the screen time debate. You're a former classroom teacher. I didn't realize you taught social studies as well, by the way. I knew you taught English, obviously, the writing connection. And you're building an education product to assist with writing instruction. Built and building. Building education products never ends.
Right.
Past and present and future tense, all of the above. So I love that you have both of those perspectives. When you hear Utah passed a screen time bill this legislative season, something like 15 other states had legislation considering some form of screen time blanket ban or limitation. LAUSD also passed some sort of policy or something about screen time at LAUSD in particular. So that's a school district level, not a state level. What's your gut reaction to hearing that?
I have a lot. First, I want to say I think it's all coming from a good place. People are really concerned
Agreed.
and have been for a while about like cell phones and social media and the impact that has on kids and their social lives and their overall health and well-being. And I get that. And so I think those concerns have been around for a while. But I think unfortunately what's happening is we're taking our fear and frustration and all the emotion that comes with that, and we're just kind of applying that fear and frustration to all technology. And I think that is misguided. And so I think most of these laws that are either passed or in the process of being proposed and debated are generally misguided, because I think they're falling for this kind of moment of moral panic around technology, that it's inherently bad. That's directly contradicted by research showing positive effect sizes of technology use in classrooms for different use cases in different contexts. So I think we're ignoring research in the name of emotion and fear. And unfortunately, I think a lot of politicians are all too willing to cash in on that, to score some points with their constituencies, because it's pretty low hanging fruit, and it's pretty like across. It's increasingly it's cutting across political divides of like this fear of technology. And again, it comes from a good place. We want to do what's best for kids. But unfortunately, I think that fear has gotten the best of us, and we're starting to push the pendulum way too far in one direction. And in the process, we're increasingly stripping valuable resources out of the hands of kids and teachers. And that is, as a former educator who had to fight tooth and nail to get devices in my classroom, and when I got those devices, it completely changed my quality of instruction in my classroom. I find it so frustrating, and it's hard for me to talk about it now because I'm building an EdTech tool, and so people automatically assume the worst of like the only reason you care about this is because it's going to hurt your
Yeah.
bottom line. I promise you that's not it. I promise you it's more growing out of this experience. Like the reason I wanted to build EdTech to begin with was because of how profound of a positive impact it had in my classroom. I think most of these laws are misguided. I'm hoping that we can bend them towards positive outcomes for EdTech, and I'm happy to talk more about what that might look like. But generally, I think they're misguided, to answer your question.
Agreed. Lumping everything, all technology, all screen time under one umbrella it's very misguided, and there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation out there that's really pushing that narrative. And I agree with you. I said, I think in both the first and second episode I did in this series was just me sharing my thoughts on this. And I said, I think that screen time should be being evaluated because there is a lot of bad use of screen time. You know, if you're only using screens as a reward, or the students that work fast and need something to do because they plowed through your learning tasks really fast and it's used as some sort of like reward, is if that's the only way you're using tech, or there's a huge difference between digital curriculums and instructional technology tools. If you are
Right.
only having students working in digital curriculums where they're watching videos and answering questions, they're not creating, they're very consumption based tech.
Yeah.
That's very, 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 very different than true
Right.
instructional tech tools.
No, I totally agree with everything you just said, and it's a part of a larger point that I think is really important. It's like ed tech, quote unquote, is not one thing. It's thousands of things. It's what you're describing. It's like it's digital curricula, it's instructional tools, it's administrative tools,
A
it's the
large
devices
umbrella.
themselves. It's a huge umbrella, and we're lumping all of these interventions, literally thousands of interventions, under one label, and we're saying it is inherently bad because of the medium. And researchers, so the most influential of the researchers that I know that have talked about this is John Hattie. I know that's a name that a lot of folks in education will recognize just because his meta-analysis work in visible learning is very influential. And he had a chapter on technology influences in that book. And in his most recent one, he literally said something to the effect of, like, if there is to be a third version of this book, we're not going to have a chapter on technology because it's absurd to refer to technology as an intervention in and of itself. It's a medium through which thousands of interventions can be implemented. And so we need to instead measure that, like the use cases and the context and the tools themselves. I think that's a healthy perspective, and that's coming from arguably the most influential education researcher of the last 20 years. We're ignoring that advice in our current moment. And that's
Mhm.
what I'm talking about when I talk about we're ignoring researchers in our current moment of moral panic. And I find it very frustrating.
It's like saying, this is a good analogy I have right in front of me. Two learning tools that I use all the time when I'm teaching: a pen or writing utensil and post it notes. It's like saying all pens are terrible and we should get rid of every pen in every classroom in the
Right.
world. And there's no good use of a pen. That's
Right.
literally what this argument comes down to. Or post-it notes. All post-it notes are bad. They're terrible for the environment. They're using trees to create them. We should never, ever, ever, ever use a post-it note
Right.
as part of learning
It,
ever again.
it's like it exactly. It's like saying like what's the effect size of a chalkboard? Like, well, depends on what you're using chalkboard for. So if you the larger point
Yeah.
here, if you strip down the arguments being made here, what you get what it reduces down to eventually is 1950s and 60s media ecology philosophy from like Marshall McLuhan and others, where basically like the medium is the message. The medium itself is what determines the message. And then in this case, they're saying like the medium of technology is inherently distracting. If you use technology, you will be distracted, and that's it. Kids can't handle it. That philosophical perspective was written off years ago. It is technologically deterministic. Like humans have free will. We can bend technology to serve our interests and serve our needs. And we do that every day in classrooms through very simple things like content filters or through basic classroom management processes that I'm happy to get into and talk about. And I mean this literally. Like I think I was aware of this anti-edtech movement pretty early in the game because I went to a conference in almost 3 years ago in Delaware, and Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath, who is I would say is the leader of the anti-edtech movement. His book, The Digital Delusion, is what is, and his testimony to the U.S. Senate a couple months ago, like, is what has kicked
Is he
off a
the
lot
one
of
that
this
compared
wave.
it to anthrax? Was that the
Yes,
guy that
yes, he
compared? Okay,
is.
all right. I mentioned that
Yeah,
in the first or second episode that yeah, there was a guy, I didn't remember his name, but that compared tech use to anthrax, basically saying that like anthrax, none of it is good.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, just the fact that someone's willing to make that comparison, I think, gives you a sense of how. I don't think they should be taken seriously if you're making those types of comparisons in front of the U.S. Senate. Like that's a silly and dangerous analogy to make, but
It is.
um, it's
It really
insane.
is. It's a dangerous
So
analogy.
it is, so he was the keynote speaker at a conference I went to in Delaware like
Mm.
3 years ago. It was Research Ed, and he was like the final speaker of the conference. And he's half of his talk was literally referencing like 50s and 60s philosophers on media ecology. It's like that's interesting work, and it's certainly something we can debate amongst you know uh, higher ed circles and folks interested in like philosophy and theory. It is not research, and it shouldn't be used to guide education policy. And it's insane to me that that's what we're using. Basically, it's disappointing on so many levels. So yeah, I'm happy to get into any of the details within there, but it's been distracting for me as someone like building ed tech. It's been hard to focus on the work in this when you're living through this moment where people are almost talking about the work you do as if you work in like the tobacco industry or
Yes.
something. It's
Yes.
not, it's crazy
I
and really
shared
disappointing.
in a couple episodes ago too that I have had some very interesting and negative interactions in the past few months, especially when I tell people what I do, because they read The Anxious Generation and they think that no matter what, all technology is now, frying the neurons in our brain and that kind of thing. I do want to dig into research more because
Yeah.
multiple things. One, you and your wife, because your wife's did your master's degree too. You both did your master's degrees at Stanford, right? Kind of at the same
That's right.
time. And your
Yeah.
wife's degree is more research education. I can't remember for sure.
No, that's a good. So yeah, we did. So we both did our masters at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. Mine was in learning design and technology. So it's more. Well, I don't want to say it's more pedagogy focused. The folks in EDS will be mad about that label, but it's more focused on like solving problems in education using the unique affordances of technology to help solve those problems. Because there are unique affordances of technology that can help solve those problems in this
There's a
criminal
whole
world.
degree at
Pretending
there
like we're
wouldn't
not.
be a master's degree at Stanford University if there wasn't evidence
Yes.
backing the use
Yeah.
of technology in learning.
I yes, thank you. Like we're writing off an entire field of validated
Yeah.
research. I met with my program director just yesterday to talk about this. Her name's Dr. Karin Forsell. She literally wrote the book on efficacy and EdTech efficacy and like how you structure a learning tool to actualize best practices in research. So that's LDT. She's wonderful. That's Karin Forsell. She's the program director. But then my wife studied education data science. So she studied, it's a
Mm.
lot more obviously data science intensive. And so it is a bit more research oriented as opposed to like practitioner oriented.
Yep.
And so she did some original research in Dr. Dora Dembski's lab on AI and its ability to provide feedback on student writing and sort of bending AI feedback towards best practices and feedback more generally. And so I think we bring a really healthy lens to this current moment of like AI and ed tech and education because she has a deeply technical understanding of AI and machine learning and natural language processing. And I think I have the pedagogy side of things because I taught for 7 years and I've worked in schools. And so I think we bring a healthy perspective to it. And the training and education we received at Stanford, like I was talking to Karin about this yesterday, I feel like it prepared me perfectly for this moment because there is a whole body of research to support technology as a meaningful technology is a broad label, but like technology can be used meaningfully to improve learning outcomes for kids. So I'm happy to fight for it.
You just gave, I feel like, your credentials as one of the top people I know to refer to actually say,
Thanks.
what does the research say? And make sure you're reciting high causal research as well. You dug into it a little bit, but tell us more of like, what does the research actually say about technology used as part of the learning process in K-12 in particular? And I know, again,
Mhm.
I'm lumping a big umbrella of technology, but especially looking towards the, is it frying the neurons of our brain argument?
Yeah, it can if it's used really poorly. If you're just parking a
Hmm.
kid in front of YouTube and being like, "Hey, dude, have some Chromebook time," like, of course, yeah. But it can also be used the exact opposite way and have extremely positive outcomes, especially when you lean into the unique affordances of technology. So it depends on how you use it. And that's not an answer people like. They want a blanket statement of like good or bad, black or white. It's neither. It's gray. It depends on how you
Yep.
use it. Technology is a Sal Khan quote. I use it all the time. Technology is an amplification of human intent. If you're a really great teacher, you can use technology to make you a super great teacher.
Yep.
Um,
Give you
if you
superpowers. I always say.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, research supports that. If you're a burnout teacher, you don't want to be in the classroom anymore. You're just kind of doing it because you whatever 5 more years and you can get to retirement, and so you just kind of roll in and technology is a great way to just kind of park the kids on something and keep them busy. You can do that too, and yeah, kids can fry their neurons just doing whatever they want on the internet. So it depends on how the tech is used, and I think the research supports that. In terms of like talking about blanket research, kind of writ large, the closest thing you can get to that are meta-analyses because they look at like a huge swath of studies within different domains, and so that's why I cite the John Hattie research because he's looked at like for example, he looked at the use of technology and its use to provide feedback on student work and found an effect size of I think zero point 0.5 standard deviations, which is a large effect size,
Yes, very
um,
large.
largely positive. So that is one simple use case, a positive use case. And this. You don't need research to tell you this if you've used technology in the classroom. It's like, well, I could manually collect 120 papers that kids have handwritten and spend my weekend reading through it, and hopefully I can get them the feedback back by like next Thursday, and they handed it in on Friday, right? So I can get them feedback. It's going to be of lower quality more than likely because I'm having to read through manually like whatever, like 20 of like 120 of these and try to provide comments and things. And by the time I get them the feedback back, will they even remember what we were working on? Or I can use a wonderful new AI tool like Short Answer or pick your favorite because there's many tools that will do this now. And the kids submit their, let's say, exit ticket, and they can get feedback on the quality of that, of their response and explanation before they leave the classroom. And so that they can then use that feedback to improve what their understanding again before they leave the classroom. That's one simple use case that when you extrapolate that out and look at studies across many different contexts, again, effect size of zero point 0.5, like super positive. There are other domains where we could look at. There was recently a meta-analysis done by Rebecca Silverman at Stanford. She looked at, this was in the context of early childhood literacy, so teaching kids how to read and write, generally positive effect sizes. It was a very nuanced study, and there's like, literally, it comes down to like specific features and apps that do or don't support early childhood literacy outcomes. But effect sizes ranging from like zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.3, which is like generally positive. Now, this is a whole other area that we could get into if you want to around what qualifies as a large effect size, because that's another thing that the anti-edtech movement is doing at the
Yeah.
movement to sort of dismiss positive research about technology. Because I've shared many of these meta-analyses publicly, and the reaction is like, well, those effect sizes aren't large enough. Those are large effect sizes. So there's a researcher at Brown, his name's Matthew Kraft. He has pushed back on this narrative that has grown up in education in the last 15, 20 years that came from John Hattie, that a large effect size is anything zero point 0.4 standard deviations and above. If it's below zero point 0.4 standard deviations and below, it's a small effect size. Actually, Jared Cooney Horvath used that reference point in his testimony to the Senate. He he literally subtracted that hinge point to take away from educational technologies effect size, which is absolutely insane and total pseudoscience. But people have pushed back on that zero point 0.4 standard deviation, specifically Matthew Kraft, of like if you look at just at meta-analyses, like the average effect size is really small for education interventions. So actually, like anything that's I think is 0.2 and above is actually quite large in education, like in
Mm,
terms of what a positive effect size would be. And so I try to explain that to folks, and it's just like, well, no, 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 just nope, that evidence doesn't count. And
mm.
that's what makes me think that we're in a moment of moral panic, because it's like these are researchers, like these are people that like spend their time reading peer-reviewed research in journals and
Yeah, their
arguing
life
about it and
is
presenting
literally
at conferences.
dedicated to this. Like, this is
Their
what they
life is
do with their life every day.
exactly,
If
exactly,
we don't
and they're
listen to
ignoring it.
them, like, who do we listen to?
Exactly, and, man, there's a whole other Substack post coming soon about, like, reform needs to come from all sides, yes, at a policy level, yes, at an EdTech level, implementation level. It also needs to come at a research level, because the research community in education is a mess and leads to unclear guidance to schools on what is best practice, and it's partly why we're in the moment that we're in. And arguing over what qualifies as a large effect size is a perfect example of that. So that's a really long-winded way of saying research supports technology in schools when used well. It's just that we're ignoring it.
So Matthew Kraft, just to make sure I understand correctly, his argument is, so like Hattie saying point 0.5 effect size and above,
Point four,
he's
but
saying
yes,
actually, oh, point 0.4, sorry, point 0.4. Matthew Kraft is saying that actually in education and the way education studies work, that we can go down to a point 0.2 effect size.
yeah, and his argument there, which I think is real because he's replicated it now twice, is basically that Hattie threw everything in, including like correlational studies, which tend to have higher effect sizes. He threw in studies that or the measures that were being used were created for the specific test that was being done, as opposed to like broader measures like standardized tests and things like that, which tend so you tend to get higher effect sizes. So basically, to put it in a layman's terms, like Hattie threw in all the research. Is kind of like a hot dog. It's easy to consume, but and tasty, but you don't want to know what's in it. Whereas Matthew Kraft only looked at like high quality, like randomized control trial level studies. And when you look at that, majority, like almost, I think it's like 33, it's like in the 30s% of studies have no effect on outcomes,
Mm.
because it's really hard to have an effect
It's
on outcomes
hard.
in education, because education is really hard. There's so many
Yeah.
factors at play in
So many
improving
fact
outcomes for
yeah, it's
kids.
really hard to say like this is the factor that
Yes.
improved student learning outcomes or this is the factor that didn't. So that's another reason why just having this blanket technology is the reason that test scores are down and technology is the reason
Yeah.
that engagement is down is really, really flawed thinking because we're not taking into account testing becoming more and more a thing in schools. The pandemic causing huge amounts of trauma. I just read a whole book on trauma, and now I'm on the trauma train because I knew this, but this book was so enlightening to me at how much trauma affects our brain. And every brain inputs trauma differently. Sometimes what is, have like big T trauma, little t trauma, people say. Sometimes what one brain interprets as little t trauma, another brain interprets as big T trauma. And the pandemic, I believe, caused trauma in every single one of us,
Oh
adults
yeah.
that have fully developed brains. And we haven't even begun to think about the trauma that happened to the kids from 2020 to 2022. And I think there's a lot of brains that had a lot of big T trauma. And
Yeah.
when you have big T trauma, your brain just shuts down. But that's not part of the conversation. The correlation does not equal causation argument, right? Like we're saying,
Yeah.
oh, I listened to this NPR. Actually, honestly, I didn't make it through. I need to go back to it, but I got so frustrated. It was an NPR
Yeah.
segment. I can't remember the exact. And usually I love NPR. My husband's an NPR addict. He's the one that sent it to me. I can't remember the name of the segment. And usually I really like this journalist and I listen to it, but it was so one-sided and it was this principal arguing that at the same time that we put devices in schools and that her middle school went one-to-one Chromebooks was the same time that test scores and engagement started to go down. No, that's
Yeah.
correlation. Correlation does not equal causation. You cannot say because this happened, it's because of this.
Yeah. And it's wild that we're prioritizing correlational studies over causal studies. That's
Yes.
another moment that kind of shows me this is about moral panic and emotion more than it is about evidence. Because, yeah, I mean, what else correlates? The correlation we could draw is that around that same time, kids started spending 7 to 8 hours outside of school on their cell phone, or on
Yep.
digital devices. So
Yep.
instead of going home to read Harry Potter, we're going home to scroll through TikTok. That may also play into it, into this, as you mentioned, as does the trauma of a pandemic, as does, I mean, a generation of kids that was raised on reading methodology that has increasingly been questioned with the science of reading
Yes.
movement. We could go down a list of 1,000 different reasons why test scores are likely declining, because it is real that they're declining. Um,
Yes.
but drawing this simple correlation of like, we bought computers and scores went down. It's the
Yep.
most spurious correlation you can imagine. So it's not. I don't think it's strong evidence. And I think the people that would tell you that they support this like science of, insert your favorite part of education, science of movement, would tell you we need causal evidence to support interventions if we're going to put them in schools. And simultaneously, they're ignoring their own advice in this moment and be like, no, actually, correlational evidence is enough. It's pretty absurd. So it's frustrating, but I am hopeful. And I wrote a Substack post about this just yesterday. I am hopeful that like it can, this current moment can push for some positive reform, because I do think EdTech does need some reform.
Agreed.
Um,
We
just
wouldn't be
not
here having this conversation if it didn't need reform, is my opinion.
right. Yeah, no, it does need reform. There are some flaws in the industry that should be addressed, but stripping resources out of the hands of teachers is the worst possible way to go about doing this. But unfortunately, it's just the easiest thing to legislate, so it's what we're doing.
Yep.
So here we are.
Well, I also want to talk about efficacy because I know this is something I've taught. We've had conversations about this and ed tech efficacy in general. If you're not familiar with that terminology, it basically efficacy measures whether a tool, in this case, we're talking digital learning tools, improve student outcomes or not. There's a huge conversation in the ed tech world about how do we measure ed tech efficacy and how do we actually know if an ed tech tool is improving student outcomes.
So that's what makes this really, really hard. And that's why people go to school for 8 years to study this and then spend their lives trying to figure this out. It's education is a social science. Social science is hard because there are so many variables that you try to control that are almost impossible to control in the way that, if you want to compare it to medical science, like that you can control in a human's body as opposed to like a classroom.
Right.
But generally speaking, to answer your question, how do you measure efficacy? The gold standard of efficacy in educational technology and a lot of education in general is a randomized control trial, or if below that, it's like a quasi experimental study. At a very broad level, we're going to paint with a broad brush here because we could get into nerdy specifics, but I don't think we need to turn this into a research methods grad school class. So, like at a basic level, is you go to a large subset of kids, ideally. Some of them get the intervention. So let's just go with short answer, the platform we're building. These kids will use short answer during this period. This subset of kids that's been randomly selected, a large number of them, they're not going to use short answer. They're going to do business as usual. We will implement these. We'll come up with a different plan, et cetera, et cetera. We'll do like a pre-post, let's say. So we'll look at their writing scores on the state test the year before, and then we'll look on the writing scores on the state test the year after. And we'll compare the control group, the kids that didn't use short answer, to the kids that did, the experimental group. We will subtract them, and then we'll divide it by the standard deviation within the test scores to find an effect size. So when I say effect size, that's what I'm referring to. It's like a 0.2, a 0.3. And like what qualifies as big? Well, I would say I'm going to go with Matthew Kraft. If the standard deviation is 0.2 or above, you have a medium to large effect size. If it's 0.05 and above, it's a smaller effect size. Sorry, if it's 0.2 and above, it's large. If it's 0.05 to 0.2, it's medium. If it's below 0.05, it's small. And that's a randomized control trial. Now, I need to complicate that. So, hooray, we got our standard deviation, and it's wonderful. The problem with that in educational technology is what you talked about at the beginning of the podcast, which is EdTech moves fast and it changes a lot. Like a product is never built, you're always building it. So the problem with that is, okay, we run a randomized control trial. It's great. We 0.5 standard deviation effect size. Amazing. Look at this. We improve learning outcomes. Well, the problem with that is if in the process of doing that research, you also added 20 new features to your platform that completely
Mhm.
changed what you do, you ended up
All the
measuring
time.
something, which happens all the time, right? Because
Yeah.
that's technology. And that's a positive thing, to be
It's a
clear,
good
because
thing. Yeah.
it's a great thing. Like if we have new research comes out that like, actually, if you do it this way, it's better. We can quickly change it, right? If you have a textbook good luck. Like that thing ain't getting updated for a decade. Like curriculum
Yep.
cycles are so slow. So that
Yep.
is a positive affordance. One of the downsides is that you end up measuring tools that no longer exist because like it changed over time. And so the
Mhm.
best advice I've seen on this comes from Molly Zimmerman and Jennifer Carolyn. They wrote an article that we read in grad school at Stanford. I think the healthiest approach to efficacy in EdTech is a portfolio approach where you build out multiple different studies of varying sizes and quality over time, because that better enables you to track your product as it changes over time. But just as importantly, it allows you to measure your impact in different contexts over time. Because the challenge of ed tech is that it's used at scale. Like we've got kids in rural West Texas using short answer, and we've got kids in urban Beijing using short answer. Those are very different contexts. And so the way that tool works and is used in those contexts is probably completely different. And so you need a smattering of different research built into a portfolio over time to speak to those different contexts because education is deeply contextual. So like the randomized control trial is the gold level, whatever the highest bar of efficacy. And then I suppose a meta-analysis of randomized control trials would then be the only thing that would be above that. But for an ed tech company, because you're constantly changing, I think that portfolio approach is healthy. And that's why if you go to our website, sorry for the shameless plug, if you go to myshortanswer.com and click on our pedagogy page, there's a little button that says see our portfolio of efficacy. And that's everything ranging from a logic model, which is basically just like, here's what our app does. Here's the research that supports every different part of our app and why it does what it does. That doesn't mean that our app works. It just means that there's at least a theoretical explanation of why it might work. And then you'll see our learner study that we ran as a part of my master's capstone project. And then you'll see case studies that we put together based on surveys and triangulation of interviews and several other factors. And what we're doing is slowly trying to build up towards the causational evidence that I just talked about, like a randomized control trial. But we haven't got there yet because RCTs are expensive and take forever. And for a
Mhm.
small company like us, where we're still building a product and changing things dramatically from day to day, it doesn't make sense. So I think that portfolio approach is healthy. And I think here's a healthy reform idea: require that an ed tech product at least have a logic model or theory of change in order to be used in schools. It's a very simple
Mm.
way to try to bend adoption towards efficacy and towards quality, as opposed to what we're talking about at the beginning of the conversation, where it's like just about the medium or just about X number of minutes per day or like silly things that aren't aligned with research. That could be a very simple step forward towards improved focus on quality. That was a long-winded response, but this is literally my master's. So
Yeah.
you've hit on a
That was
very that topic
fantastic.
I like talking about.
That was fantastic. And I love that you noted that it's also so tricky with ed tech research. It's not like researching a textbook based curriculum that is
Mm-hmm.
static. And
Yeah,
I tell teachers this, I tell ed tech companies this. The small, tiny little things are what make or break an ed tech product. Like the teeny tiniest little details. So you could make a really small change, a UI change, a UX change, a design change, a pedagogical change in a product, and it can completely make or break the teacher using it, how the teacher uses it, and that can completely change a study that was done
yeah,
prior or post that change or
yeah.
both.
You're 100% right. And I've never had more appreciation for that concept than I do now as someone building this stuff at scale.
I
It's like
bet.
literally, if we choose to make this little user interface element a tab instead of a toggle, that can have a profound impact at scale. So yeah, it's fascinating, and this is what I love about the work. You go from 10,000-foot level conversations about what qualifies as an effect size, a positive effect size, and meta-analyses, and then you zoom all the way into like what should the radius of this of the corner of this button, like how should it be a 3 radius or a 5 radius when I design it in Figma. So it's like it's granular and it's universal all at the same time, and it's fascinating work because it all matters.
Yeah. And the more you get in and use and explore edtech tools, the more you start to notice those little tiny details. For me, when I'm evaluating an edtech product, I look for those little tiny details, and that's a big indicator to me of the quality of the product. Last question on this
Well,
topic, and then we'll move on. If you are a school leader, a teacher, listening to this and you're like, I want to make sure that I am using high quality ed tech tools in my classroom, or a school leader that's like, I want to make sure I'm putting high quality ed tech tools in the hands of my teachers and students, what would be your advice to them? What would you tell them?
First, I would take matters into your own hands. And what I mean by that is if a teacher's requesting to use a tool, go to the website, look at it. Do they have a page or somewhere where they're explaining the research supporting their tool? And when I say research, I mean research. What you'll find is there are a lot of tools that
Not a
they have
white
web
paper.
pages. Right,
No,
right.
not a
It's
white
like
paper.
there's a lot of vibey hand waving that happens with like our learning principles, and it's just like this sort of like vague explanation of like constructivism. It's like, okay, that's nice, but that's not research. That's just kind
Yeah.
of a that's a
That's a
lens on
philosophy.
how it's a
You're
philosophy.
aligning your tool to an educational philosophy, which is
Right,
not
which is
bad, but it's not
it's not bad.
research. Yeah.
Exactly, it's not bad, but it's like, what are the specific things your app is doing, and are those things supported by research? And it's called theory of change. It's called a logic model. But that to me, that's the baseline of efficacy. And under the Every Student Succeeds Act that was passed by the Obama administration, they created these tiers of efficacy. And the first tier, the lowest
Mm.
bar, is ESSA level 4, and ESSA level 4 just means you have a logic model. So to me, if I'm considering adopting an ed tech tool, that's I'm at least looking for that baseline. Does it have a logic model? Does it have a theory of change? Do they even have somewhere on their site where they're talking about efficacy? Because if not, alarm bells should be ringing. It doesn't necessarily mean that a tool isn't research supported or backed or aligned to best practice if it doesn't have it, but it's a pretty strong indication that the people building it haven't considered that, which to me is a sign that, you know, it's a strong signal. So I that would be my simplest advice. There are other places though that schools can go to get advice on this stuff. ISTE has a product index that's pretty good, where they kind of rate and review and kind of vet technology. EdSurge has one. Common Sense Media used to
Common
have
Sense
one, but they
Media.
gave up.
Oh, they
Um,
did? I didn't
I,
know that. Okay.
they did. So their product index is, I think it's still around maybe, but they're not updating it. I don't know. I know Johns Hopkins University has one. It's called like
Okay.
ESSA ooh, something. But the problem with all of these is like a lot of administrators don't know they exist, and a lot of them also just like are not up to date because it's hard to
Mm.
keep up to date with the edtech market. I
They
actually wrote
change all
about
the
this in a
time.
Substack. They change all the time, right? So it's like I applied last year and I was approved and got a good score, but
Mhm.
then if I added 15 new features, I guess I'll have to apply again. And then like even large organizations like Common Sense Media can't keep up. And that's why I do think we need some sort of regulatory body that can like actually be the stamp of approval, just like the way we have the FDA and like food and drug. We need the equivalent of that in education, of like a stamp of approval from a
Mm.
verified government source that's like, this is good and okay. Because that is going back to like the flaws of the industry. One of them is there's a lot of garbage efficacy numbers being thrown around that are based on not real research. It's just kind of like testimonials and sort of like we put together our little case study and we're pretending it's like a peer-reviewed randomized controlled trial, and in reality it's just like an interview with one teacher that had a good experience. Like that type of stuff probably should not be allowed, or if it is, it needs to come with a label that's like, this statement has not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. You know what I mean? So there is a lot of fake efficacy going around. That's one of the major flaws that hopefully can be
Mm.
addressed in this current moment of angst. But now I've gotten off topic. So to go back to your original question, look for a theory of change, look for a portfolio of efficacy on the website. And then in lieu of that, maybe go to one of these product indexes and see what other people are saying. And then another great way to, maybe this is even more relevant, is if you're looking at using an ed tech tool, call the district down the street from you that maybe already is using it or had teachers, and get their perspective. Unfortunately, we a lot of times in school districts we live in silos where like we're like right next to each other, but we don't talk to the district over about what's working and what's not. So I think those conversations could be healthy too. But just even just taking a more proactive stance of like, I'm going to look into the efficacy before I approve a tool, that in and of itself would be a step forward, because oftentimes that's not happening. So maybe this current moment could be good for that, at least.
Switching gears, I want to make sure we talk more about short answer because it is a really, really amazing tool. Pretend I am a skeptical English teacher and walk me through short answer and why should I spend my very limited time to explore short answer and try it with my students.
So if you're a skeptical English teacher, then I'm going to start with the why. I'm not going to start with the product. Let's look at our current moment. We now live in a world where AI can write for you, like a machine can write. It's a momentous, it's a crazy moment in human history. That completely upends, I think, how we need to approach the way we teach and assess writing. It doesn't devalue teaching kids how to write. It is still critically important to learn how to write, but I do think it changes how we go about teaching writing. The first thing that I would say, once writing leaves the classroom, which it necessarily needs to, because oftentimes it just takes a long time to produce longer form writing. Once writing leaves the classroom, it's hard to know how much of an influence AI is having on that student's process. So I think a very simple step forward is we need to do more writing in class, which will probably look like shorter form writing. I also think, the first thing I see when I log into Gmail in 2026 is a thing that says, "Hey, want me to write the email for you?" Our kids are going to
Right
use that
for me.
button, and
Yep.
exactly, and that button is going to go everywhere. So that's going to result in less writing practice. Our kids already struggle with writing. The less you practice, the more your skills atrophy. Troubling situation. We can't just say, well, the English teacher needs to do more writing. They don't have the bandwidth. It's going to take a team. We have to embed more writing across the curriculum. I think that's kind of step number 2, where it can't just fall on the English teacher anymore. It needs to be embedded across the curriculum. That's been advocated for decades. It's been historically really challenging to pull off, but I think any writing tool needs to be built with that in mind, and that's partly why we built Short Answer. And then the third piece that I would say to address this challenge is it has to be an engaging experience. It has to be an experience where the kid is going to fall in love with writing, because how on earth are we going to motivate kids to want to learn how to do this really, really challenging thing, arguably one of the hardest things you learn how to do in school, because writing is so cognitively complex.
Very hard.
How are we going to motivate a kid to want to wrestle with this and struggle and fail with it in a world where they can press a button and it'll do it for them in 10 seconds? So the third piece is, I struggle to say engagement, because then we fall into like, well, it's just going to be a game and silliness. But no, but it needs to be an experience where a kid falls in love with writing and reaches a flow state and just like loves doing it inherently. And so those 3 pieces, more in class, more across the curriculum, and more engaging, I think are critical. And that's why we have built Short Answers. I like to start with the why, especially when talking about cynical English teachers and cynical teachers in general about why should I use your EdTech tool. That's our why. The way that we do it with Short Answers is short form social writing practice that's intended to be embedded across the curriculum by combining daily formative assessment of whatever skill you're teaching with writing instruction. So teacher pulls up code, kids sign in, kids see prompt. Prompt could be anything from, if you're in English class, copy paste in your opening paragraph to the research paper we're writing. Or if you're in science class, explain the process of cell division as an exit ticket. Right? It could be anything. It could be assessing content, it could be doing literal writing instruction. Kids do it, submit it, then teacher clicks begin feedback, going back to Hattie's effect size, 0.5 effect size of using technology to improve feedback processes in classrooms. Kids either get feedback from their peers, and that's a huge part of what we try to do, because we think that's inherently motivating for kids because it creates an authentic audience for their work. Like, oh my gosh, my classmates are going to see what I wrote. I should try hard. And it's anonymous, so we do it safely, but I think that's a key part of it. Or they get feedback from AI, or they get feedback from both. And I think there's some really interesting things you can do with augmenting AI and peer feedback. So they get that feedback, they reflect on it. And then as a class, then the final step is discussion and reflection. So every Short Answer activity follows that same kind of core structure of do some writing, get some feedback, discuss and reflect on the feedback, and then ideally go back to the do some more writing, because we're using that feedback to improve our understanding and using that discussion to improve our understanding. So that's Short Answer as it currently exists. We have a whole new host of features coming soon, teaser, that
Oh,
I think are going to completely augment that entire process. And it's going to lead to some massive changes to Short Answer this summer. So stay tuned for that. I'm just going to tease them. I don't want to say what they are yet,
exciting.
but that's the core idea. And it's very straightforward. Our kind of philosophy, going back to your point on design, is like we want to do only a few things, but we want to do them extremely well, as opposed to trying to be like we do a bajillion different things type of tool. So it's very simple, and I think in that way it served us well. And so we have about 100,000 monthly active teachers and students across all
Wow.
50 states and several countries at this point. And but that's kind of the core of it, both what it does and the why behind what we do.
I love it. It's so engaging. Students love it. They really do.
Yes.
It really gets them excited to want to write. And that anonymous peer feedback element really motivates them to try because they
Yes.
don't want to submit something terrible that their peers are going to look at and tear apart and get
Yeah.
horrible feedback on. So it really does motivate. And I love that you hit on the engagement point. I talk about, and I talk to teachers about this a lot when I'm training them about our educational philosophy. I'm not having them write like they're, I'm sure you had to do it in your teacher prep program where you had to write your philosophy on education. We don't go that far, but I do like to get them to really think like, what is your philosophy as a teacher? What is your role? What is your purpose as a teacher? And some teachers really think that they are there to get kids to do hard stuff and that kids should just be able to, that grit, just plow through and do the hard thing. I don't need to try to engage them. I just feel so strongly against that. And the more that I teach, work with, talk to Gen Z and Gen Alpha learners, the more I realize that they are so different, as in every generation. Every generation
Yeah.
is significantly different than the previous generations on a whole, right? Lumping them all together because we have different experiences growing up. Now, technology has just changed the generational experience immensely. And I really feel that if we don't engage Gen Z and Gen Alpha learners in a different way than we have previous generations, that we are just going to see test scores just plummet
Yeah.
down and down and down and down. And short answer just is really great at hitting that, the combination of a little bit of like gamification with a little bit of peer feedback, with the AI feedback, with the teacher leading. The teacher leads the entire activity, that it is very engaging for Gen Z and Gen Alpha learners in my experience. More Gen Z. I've seen it more Gen Z than Gen Alpha. On that note, is
Yeah.
there a, do you say with short answer, middle school, high school only, all K-12? Can I use it in higher ed if I'm a higher ed person listening here?
Good question. It's generally second grade through 12th grade.
Okay.
And even, second grade, I'll be honest, we get some classes it goes like gangbusters and they're like, heck yeah, this is amazing. Our second graders are writing. And then in some classes, it's like, this is way too advanced. So it
Mm,
just depends on the
depends
context.
on where they
Um,
are. Yeah.
that's specific with second grade.
Yeah.
For sure, it's third through 12. At the higher ed level, it's a bit. We've had some folks use it with some success, but it tends to be K-12 oriented, and especially when you use the tool, you'll kind of understand why. You can tell from the design it's oriented towards K-12. Going back, you said something that was really interesting and something I think about a lot when you're talking about engagement and what does it look like. And I think that's like partly what makes designing EdTech so interesting is like you want to create an engaging experience that a kid wants to do, but you don't want it to spill so far that the kids are just conking out, kind of playing games and not really focusing on the
Yes.
content. And
Yes.
I do think in the larger context of this conversation around ed tech reform and why people are skeptical of ed tech is there are a lot of tools that have kind of leaned really heavily into sort of the candy side of things where it's like, yeah, the kids beg the teacher to do it, but the kids beg the teacher to do it because they're essentially just playing games for 20 minutes. Like
There's not a
the
huge
learning
amount of
side of it
learning
gets
value. Yeah. Yeah.
exact. So it's this really fine line to walk. And I always get nervous when I even say the word gamification because I think
Yes.
alarm bells kind of
Yeah.
rightfully go off for people. It's like, no, no, no. I mean, if you use our tool, you'll get a sense of it. It's like the gamification is very light.
Very
And
light.
we're hoping the core engagement comes from what you just talked about, which is like, oh my gosh, my classmates are going to see what I wrote. And there's something just intrinsically motivating about like creating something and sharing it with people. I'm hoping that, which I think is, it's not extrinsic. It's not points and bells and whistles and badges. It's creative and sharing and social in ways that I think are more healthy and
Which
also
is
just like more
how Gen
sustainable.
Z and Gen Alpha, that's the world that they live in. They live in a
Yeah.
world of gamification. I actually have an episode coming up here in a few weeks, closer to the end of June. It'll come out where we're really diving into gamification versus game-based learning and the
Mhm.
misconceptions. There's a huge misconceptions of not understanding the difference. Gamification is, well, actually, let me start with game-based learning. Game-based learning is you're learning through a game. You are playing a
Mhm.
game and it's the learning process. Gamification is we're adding elements of gaming to learning. So points, that's gamification right there.
Right.
Badges, leaderboards, XP, that's kind of same as points. That's gamification. So huge misunderstandings between the differences in the two. And I do think that both have gotten also a bad rap because of a lot of misinformation around that. And there are products out there that have gone too far with
Yep.
the gamification.
100%.
I think that that hasn't helped the bad, but the way that Gen Z and Gen Alpha learn and the way their brains think and the world that they live in of social media and interactive internet experiences, they really do engage to those small gamification elements in my experiences. And that's where
Yep.
EdTech can, if done right, can really help with that engagement factor. And it's so ironic because one point we're saying out of this side of our mouth that Gen Z and Gen Alpha aren't engaged. It's really hard to engage them. They're checked out of learning. And the other side of our mouth, we're saying, oh, gamification is terrible and never use it.
Right.
Super
Right.
ironic because if you do it right, gamification is a really powerful way to engage Gen Z and Gen Alpha learners, in my experience. And I
Yeah,
do
I
think
agree
Short
with you.
Answer is doing that right. And I'm not just saying that because Adam is on the podcast here. Believe me, if anybody knows me, they know that I speak my mind and I tell it how it is, even if people don't want to hear the truth. So I wouldn't be
Yeah.
saying that if I didn't really think that.
Well, thank you. And I also think this generation of kids, for that matter, millennials and yeah, Gen Z and anyone that was raised in this like tech era, there's a desperation, maybe is a strong word, but there's a strong desire for social connection. And you see that in
Yes.
different patterns in society. And I think really good ed tech going forward will be tech that finds ways to sort of scaffold human interaction in the classroom. And I'm hoping that's what Short Answer can be.
Yep.
For example, we have an activity where, okay, kids submit writing, get feedback. Did the class hit a score goal together? That's kind of the gamification element. It's team based. But then there's an option the teacher can click that's like reflect together, and it pulls up names on the board, and it's like go sit, Adam, go sit with Lindy, and Jimbo, go sit with Kearney. The kids have to go then sit together, and then they together go through a structured reflection where they're talking through what they wrote about, why they wrote about it, the feedback they got, if they agreed with the feedback. But that's finding a way to use technology to like get kids sitting together talking to each other socially in a structured way that supports learning through this like think pair share model. So I want to really lean into that as we continue to build and scale Short Answer, and that's going to be part of the updates that you'll see later this summer. Keep teasing those.
Yay. I'm excited. I'm excited to see them. Short answer, if you're one of those that are in the camp of you think AI is the end of humanity and it's getting rid of critical thinking and all the terrible things, that end of the AI spectrum, if you're at that end, you should go check out Short Answer because it is developed in a way that it pulls the very great powerful parts of the technology, and not just AI in general, but if you are on the spectrum of ed tech where you do think that tech is like ruining the neurons in our brain and there's nothing good about it, as well as AI is the end of humanity. My Short Answer is a great example of how you can pull the really powerful parts of the technology to do things like anonymous peer feedback. That
Yes.
super powerful engagement element that would be very hard to do without the technology. So there you go.
Yeah, I was just getting that you've identified an affordance. Like going back to this larger conversation about tech, it does have unique affordances that enable it to improve learning in unique ways. One of them is anonymity when it comes to writing. It's so
Yeah.
easy for stuff to be anonymous, which can be obviously also has, has some downsides. But in the context of providing peer feedback on writing, that anonymity is much easier to pull off digitally, which is partly
Yep.
why we've built Short Answer the way it is. So I just want to double click on that.
Two more questions that I know teachers, educators listening probably have if they're interested in trying it. Number one, go to myshortanswer.com. Is this only for English teachers? I feel like you already kind of answered this,
No.
but I want to specifically hit that point.
Yeah, and that's why we called it Short Answers, because we didn't want to call it like the writing tool,
Yes,
because
yes.
when a science teacher sees the writing tool, they're like, it's not for me. And we were like, Short Answer, that's kind of something that is everybody uses. But yeah, no, it's not just for English teachers. In fact, it's built from the ground up to work just as well for social studies and science and the electives um, as it is for English. It does work in math. It works in math with specific use cases. The best being like error analysis tasks, where it's
Mm.
like teacher uploads picture of incorrectly worked equation and using writing, kids explain what's wrong with the
Oh,
equation and that sort of
okay.
thing. It's not great. I'll just be transparent. It's not great for writing if you're trying to get kids to like work through a problem because it's made for text and
Yep.
we don't have a digital whiteboard functionality.
I could see being used
So
for word problems though in math.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for concepts and for like definitions and yeah, no, it definitely can be used in math. I'm just being transparent. Like of the use cases, I would say generally it goes English and then social studies science is the next most common use case. And then down into the electives, and that's probably just a product of there's teachers in the electives than there are in the core content area, and then math. So that's kind of the flow. And but we've built it from the ground up to work across the curriculum. And sorry to keep doing this, but we have some features coming this summer that are going to help even more to embed it in your content area. So I'm excited to roll those out and stop teasing them like this.
When I was teaching career and tech ed, I would 100% used short answer. I taught personal finance, and my
Oh,
students
nice.
told me that they wrote more in their personal finance class than they did in English.
Yeah. No,
Because I,
and that's a great thing.
yeah, no, I literally had students tell me that multiple times. Like, we write, and of course, they're like, we write more in this class than we do in English class. But that's a
You're
perfect
doing
example.
too much.
Like, career and tech ed.
Yeah.
Hey, no, 100% would have used short answer a lot actually, and it works really great if you're like an exit ticket person. Really great for that. I think you can really use it as that anticipatory set at the beginning of the lesson. Second question that I'm sure people have is pricing to use short answer.
It's interesting that you asked that question today. Just last Friday, we changed some things. So, straightforward response. Beginning June 15th, we will no longer offer individual teacher licenses. We used to offer individual teacher licenses for $75 per year. We just announced last Friday that in the upcoming month, we're going to get rid of that option. That was a controversial decision and not an easy one. And it was frustrating for a lot of our teachers. And if I'm happy to talk about why we chose to make that decision if we want to get into it. And in fact, I would kind of like to because it gives me a space to
Yeah,
like
go
actually
for it.
share our thoughts on it. But just quickly to answer your question. So otherwise it's we do site-wide licenses or district-wide licenses. We price that per student. It depends on the size of your district, but right now we tend to charge anywhere between $2 to $4 per student, depending on the size and level of adoption. So that's general pricing and pricing structure. We're happy to do some pilots of the premium version of our tool in a structured way to try it out before you buy it. I think that's a healthy process in EdTech adoption. That said, we also have a free plan. So if you're just like, dude, I don't have budget, but this sounds cool and I want to use it, fine. We still have a really robust free plan that includes many of in fact, all the elements that you and I have talked about on this podcast, like the peer-to-peer feedback, all those things. So we do have a free plan and that will continue to be available. It's just that literally last Friday, we announced that we're removing individual purchases of licenses. I'm happy to talk about why, but that's the pricing structure.
We've done a whole episode just on like research and efficacy and the screen time debate, and then we could have done a whole episode on short answer, and then we could also have done a whole episode on writing instruction in the age of AI, because obviously you are a expert in that area. I was lucky to get to go to your workshop at
Oh
TCA
man.
this year.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
glad to have you. It was
All
cool to
right,
see
all
you.
right, all right. Chef's
Yeah,
kiss to the Matthew McConaughey reference there. It was fantastic. Seriously, I am very critical of my PD time, especially conference sessions. I don't have a lot of time to go to conference sessions because I'm always presenting and doing a million other things. And B, I'm always very careful at the conference sessions that I do choose to go to because I have such little time. It was very, very good. I actually have gone back and referenced your slide deck several times, which I
thank
also
you.
would say that I rarely do. It was very helpful for me because I get tons of questions on
Yeah.
the writing in the age of AI debate. A few things to hit on here. You said that you think that writing instruction in the age of advanced AI, generative AI, agentic AI that we're in right now, does need to change. You hit on that a little bit. What else would you add to that for teachers?
Yeah, no, we lead 4-hour workshops on this, so I want to preface it that
I
like
know,
we're
I
not
know, I know.
we're not going to do it
Oh,
justice. And
all right, all
oh, go
right, all
ahead.
right. I know,
All
I know,
right,
I
all right.
know.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny at the beginning of that session to say like, how many people are here just for the McConaughey pun, and like half the people raised their hands. So, but I was glad they were there. Okay, quickly, I'll just rattle them off. Don't use AI detection software; it doesn't work. That's not going to be a solution, unfortunately, especially in a world of agentic AI. Even revision tracking tools, which I would have suggested even just 6 months ago, moving forward, it's not going to be reliable necessarily because you can use AI agents to autonomously write a paper for
Yep,
you and kind of simulate a revision history. We're pretty much already in that world.
yep,
So I think that the healthiest path forward, in addition to more writing in class and more writing across the curriculum, is more layered assessment. And I talked about this in the TCA presentation. This is from Philip Dawson and his interpretation of Dr. Kiara Rundle's research. But it's basically thinking about any layer of assessment that you come up with to measure how well a kid can write or do anything really is going to have holes in it that AI plagiarism can easily get through because AI can do just about any task you throw at a kid. But where one layer might have a hole, another layer might not. It's called Swiss cheese model sometimes. So you want to stack the layers of Swiss cheese, where one has a hole, another might not. You're going to eventually block that AI plagiarism. And for example, an example I talk about in writing is like, okay, if it's a 5-page research paper, it's big summative for my 8th graders, let's say, or freshmen, I don't know. We'll do more in-class writing, but then we're also going to do peer conferencing. That's going to be a layer where they have to bring their writing into class and defend what they wrote to small groups, let's say. And then maybe while they do that, another layer is going to be, I'm going to go around and have a one-on-one conversation with students and talk to them while they're doing the peer conferencing, where they walk me through what they've written. And then maybe we're also going to use revision tracking. That can be a layer two. Like it's flawed, but there's some potential there. Like it's still kind of helpful because a lot of kids don't have access to agentic AI quite yet. And then maybe if it's a big enough summative assessment, maybe we're going to do an in-class presentation of your paper where you walk the class through your process and talk through why you structured it the way you did, or what your thesis was, or defend what you wrote. So you're adding like multiple different layers to this assessment, such that plagiarism might get through one or two of them, but it's not going to get through all of them. How you go about structuring those layers depends on the assignment. It depends on what you're teaching, like your content area. I mean, what age group you're working with, a lot of different things. But I think that lens is a really healthy one of assessment layering because that's just kind of general good practice informative assessment anyway. So we have this whole resource, and if people reach out to me, my email is adam@myshortanswer.com. I can share it about like what might a layer look like, and like what do layers look like before writing, during writing, after writing. There's a lot of different things we can do, but just that lens of layering assessment, I would say, to keep my response as succinct as I can, that would be my answer to like structural reform that needs to happen to continue to accurately and effectively teach and assess writing in a world where machines can do it for us.
I love that answer from multiple perspectives. One, because I 100% agree, there is no silver bullet answer to this.
Yeah.
And I know that's super frustrating for educators, and that's not what you want to hear. And you want to hear that, oh, I can use revision tracking or AI content detectors, and that'll just solve this problem. Silver bullet. But the evidence is huge. It just does not work. And exactly what Adam said, the more advanced, especially the more we're getting into agentic AI, even that tracking revision history, it just is not going to work. It could be one teeny little tool in your layers, one teeny little layer in your layers maybe, but it can't be the only thing that you're doing. I also love that answer because I loved that you introduced that Swiss cheese model. I think that's actually what I've gone back and referenced a few times
Yeah.
in the slide deck because I have the same analogy, but I use puzzle pieces instead
Yeah.
when I'm talking to teachers about assessing in the age of AI, and this idea that if you only have one puzzle piece, even two puzzle pieces, that's not a puzzle. You've got to have at least three puzzle pieces. And ideally, the more puzzle pieces you have, the harder the puzzle. A 1,000-piece
Yeah.
puzzle is a lot harder than a 500-piece puzzle to do. So it's the same idea, like layering Swiss cheese and covering the holes, adding more puzzle pieces. It has to be a multi-layered approach. And that is not just writing, by the way. It's
Yeah.
essential to writing because that's what AI, large language models in particular, are best at. Right now, it is writing. It's also, I think, what we have to do across really all assessment is take this really multi-layered layered approach. I will link to, of course, myshortanswer.com in the show notes. We'll link to your Substack. I linked to it in a couple episodes ago, the specific article you wrote. It was a 2-part article on, EdTech is worth saving or something like that. But we'll link to your Substack. I haven't read the one you just put out. I'll have to go back and read that. I'll put your email in there as well. So people will have all of that. Wrapping up here, anything else you want to share with listeners in terms of how they can connect with you?
No, you shared it all. I mean, my email's Adam at myshortanswer. Anybody can reach out to me. I'm happy to chat. I genuinely enjoyed this conversation and can continue having it for hours because I'm passionate about
Same.
this work. And I think we're in a really important moment for education, but also educational technology specifically. And the decisions we make in the next 6 to 12 months feel like they're going to reverberate for the next 5 to 10 years. So it feels like a really important moment. And I appreciate you giving me a chance to share my voice on this. And I hope that you will, and I know you do because you're a rock star, will continue to lift up the voices of educators because I think their voices are kind of being lost in this moment.
Yes.
There's just like this assumption of like no one ever wanted technology and why do we ever even adopt it to begin with? Like, well, you should go talk to the 10,000 teachers that I see every year at EdTech conferences that
Yep.
love this stuff because of the positive impact it's having in their classroom. So please keep doing what you do and please keep lifting up those voices because I think they're really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I might have to have you back on to dig more into writing instruction, especially in the age of AI, because that is such a hot
Yeah.
button topic. And you said it, but I know you guys do like 4-hour workshops specifically
Yeah.
focused on this. Do you have that on the Short Answer website?
Yeah. Yeah. If you go to at the top, there's like a getting started button, and then there'll be an option for like professional development and workshops, and then it'll give you the information.
Okay.
We will be leading it. Oh man, what's the next conference? We lead a lot with school districts, but the next conference I think we're leading it at will be the South Dakota Teachers in English Conference. Huge
Okay.
conference that I'm sure all your listeners will be at. Just kidding. And then the
Where's that
biggest
at,
one
by
is
the way? Is that in Rapid City or Sioux Falls?
no, it's in Sioux Falls. It's in
Since
Sioux
you've
Falls.
okay, yeah, that's a long ways from me.
It's a long way for you.
Yeah.
But we'll be in Philadelphia for the National Council of Teachers of English conference, and we're going to
Okay.
lead the workshop. It's going to be the full 4-hour workshop, and we're going to lead it with one of our schools, Kimberly Sosby, who's an awesome director of secondary ELA at Grand Prairie ISD in Texas. Her and I are going to lead it together. So if you've got English teachers that are on the Eastern Seaboard or who are members of the National Council of Teachers of English, we'll be in Philadelphia leading it this fall. And any conference we go to, we try to lead a version of it. So yeah, please reach out. I'm happy to talk about that or anything,
Okay.
educational technology, efficacy, short answer, writing, whatever.
I will put a link to the writing workshops in the show notes as well if there's any teachers that are specifically interested in that. I want to try to go. I got your 50-minute version of your 4 hours. I would love to get the full 4 hours myself. For real, wrapping up, we end every episode with a Make a Tech 100 moment, which is like, what is your final thoughts of what you want to leave listeners with?
Oh man,
We covered a lot of ground in this episode.
we covered so much ground. If you're an educator listening to this, you probably like educational technology because that's what you do, Lindy, and you're really good at it. So I guess my thing to share would be share your voice. And when I say share your voice, I just mean share your experience. Share how you use technology and how it has positively improved outcomes in your classroom in this. But I think those stories are being lost in our current echo chamber around how awful technology is. And we're losing sight of the really positive use cases and affordances in education. And the most important voices we need to hear those from our teachers, like the people that might be listening to this podcast. So I'd just say share your voice, share your stories on social media, on Substack, with your principal, with your school board, with your parents, like any audience to sort of help I don't say combat, but just to help put some balm on the
Yeah,
the current moment. That would be my thing I would leave with, I guess.
100% agree. The naysayers are loud. So we have to be loud in response
Yeah.
to show the other end of the spectrum. By the way, I loved in your workshop that I think you called it radical centrism. What did you call it?
Radical
Yeah,
centrism. Yeah,
radical.
that's right.
This idea of there's a spectrum on one end of the other. One spectrum is, It's great and everything's great. Like right now, AI is going to save humanity. Da, 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 da. And then the other end of the spectrum is it's all terrible. It's ruining our brains. AI is the end of humanity, right? And your argument was be a radical centrist in the middle.
Yes.
I love that for multiple reasons. One of the reasons is that's exactly what I tell teachers, especially when it comes to the AI debate right now. I always say, you want to be in the center. You want to pull the powerful parts of the technology and leverage the powerful parts and mitigate the bad parts. So
Agreed.
I've been using your radical centrist
It's
terminology
funny that
ever
label's
since
become
then.
more popular.
Be
There's a
a
really
radical
popular
centrist.
podcast now. But yeah, yeah, be
Is
a
there?
radical centrist.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, awesome. Love it. All right. Thank you so much, Adam. Great conversation. And like I said, we might have to have you back on the podcast.
anytime. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining Make EdTech 100. I know educator time is valuable, and I'm honored you choose to spend yours with me. For more EdTech strategies you can use tomorrow and ways to bring me to your school or event, head to lindyhawk.com. If this episode resonated, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'm Lindy Hawk. Go forth and make EdTech 100.